Hello, my name is Jessie, and I'm going to be taking you through a yearly training plan for the Team Ontario Golf Program. Coming at this from the technical leader manager performance perspective, I'm going to be looking at the overall program composition rather than a specific athlete. So throughout this presentation, you will see kind of what our coaches and our management and performance team and IST team are doing behind the scenes to make the entire program function rather than what is required for each individual athlete. So first I want to take you through, this is the Canadian long-term player development program. And I kind of just want to identify where Team Ontario sits in this pathway. So we are kind of right in that learn to compete, train to compete stage. The athletes on this team are U19 athletes, so they're still in high school. They haven't turned 19 yet. Many of them, their goal is to either make the national team with Golf Canada or to go on and play NCAA golf. As I've identified in some of my other projects, such as with KIN 515, NCAA route is still predominantly the route to make that compete to win, to turn professional, to be the to reach that gold medal performance standard. Well, it is changing a little bit on the women's side as the route, and it is predominantly still the route we're seeing taken. So for the purposes of this project, we're going to assume that our Team Ontario athletes have either the goal of making the national team or going on to play collegiate golf. So here is a look at kind of the cycle of a year with our Team Ontario program. So I'm going to start in the fall, September, October. Of course, we have competition during this time, but this is also kind of our main dead period in the sense that it's where our previous year team is kind of ending and where our new team will begin. So within this, we have kind of a selection camp, which we call Super Camp. And this is not more than a selection camp, as it's more to allow more athletes to experience what it is to be a high performance athlete. We find a lot of the time when we get these athletes in the fall, they've often had very good results throughout the summer in the course of the last few years of their development, but they are not well-rounded athletes in that they are learning about nutrition, the mental side of the game, and physical side of the game. So kind of tried to broaden the reach of the program to open the eyes of more athletes to those sides of the game. So a big part of this fall winter is, again, exposing more athletes with kind of that super camp, selection camp process, providing more education to the athletes on the status of the game in Ontario, where it relates nationally and internationally. And again, setting up those training plans specific to each athlete that's going to need different things, have different goals for each athlete. Then in the winter, we're predominantly looking at training, getting stronger, getting faster, getting better ball speed, working heavily on those technical skills that kind of get neglected throughout the season when you're constantly competing. In this time, we're also really focusing in on that college recruitment side, making sure that we have a strong list of potential schools, strong list of potential coaches, understanding where we fit in that landscape. Scheduling a plan for the off season and for the spring season. Another thing that we need to navigate pretty heavily in this space is working with those personal coaches. So the athletes have come to us for a reason. They've made the provincial program because of past success. A lot of that has to do with their personal coach, and we don't want to leave that out. So there is a fine line between instilling more knowledge on the athlete and making sure that they have what got them to that level. Spring, March, April, this is kind of when we're kicking up into that. We're doing 1 or 2 competitions in the spring, making sure we're ready. This is one of the main benefits of the Team Ontario program, is with the grass, on grass training that we are able to provide in the winter. They are getting a head up on the rest of Canada. They're ready to go in the end of April, early May, when the Ontario season kicks off, and have a couple competitions out of their belt. So we're not using that time to get our feet wet. We're really diving into the competition. And then, of course, the summer is our heavily loaded competition season. It's going to look a little bit different depending on where they are in their careers, in their junior careers, sorry. So if they're a U19, U17 athlete, it's going to go through Match Pro the entire season. If they're a U19 athlete that is going off to college, it might be a little bit lighter, as the heavy season in college is in the fall. So they might need to take a little bit of a taper off a little bit before they normally would, and maybe have a schedule that involves a little bit more amateur competition to get ready for that. And then, of course, during this time, a big part of the Team Ontario program is tracking the results of potential athletes for the team, seeing who's trending in the right direction, seeing who could benefit from additional training time on Team Ontario in the future. And then just in the bottom here, I've included kind of low contact, high, and medium. And that's kind of how involved we are in their development, in their process through each stage of these things. So the fall, like I said, pretty low contact as we're kind of in that middle stages of our teams. Winter, we're trying to get all those technical skills down. Same with spring, get ready for the season. And then summer, that's not the time for technical work. We're hoping that the winter and the spring, we've done all the work and they can just be away to the races to succeed in the summer. So I'm going to start and go into a little bit of depth of kind of each of these 4 areas, starting with the fall. So late September through to early November, a couple big events happen in Ontario. The first is our Super Camp Tour Championship. So in this is an area for the province to identify the top performing athletes. So invitations are sent to the top 30 athletes in Ontario who still have at least 1 year of junior eligibility left. And we have a goal that we have a 90% acceptance rate for that. So the point of this camp is to kind of do some of the things that you would do in the onboarding of a team now. And it also allows us to get a lot of that data for kind of that next group of athletes to see if we're trending in the right direction overall as a province, or if there is an area that we are lacking overall. And this is something that we've really actually has been valuable in doing these assessments with more than just the provincial team athletes, as we have noticed a huge gap, particularly in our wedge, in our short game, with our athletes coming through the ranks. And it's been great to identify some more programming and more development opportunities kind of at the trying to compete earlier on in those stages, and trying to address some of those things earlier and build habits. So again, at this time, we're really looking at those assessments. You can't really see here, but there's some strings on the ground. These are national tests standardized across Canada, which is great because we're able to compare the Ontario results, both with other provinces and with our national team program, which has been very valuable in seeing exactly where we stand, how close are those athletes who have the goal of making the national team to actually making the national team, how far are they, et cetera. It also, like I said, we find that the kids that come onto Team Ontario are often not as well-rounded as we would hope. So this allows us to give that high performance exposure to more kids so that when they do come into the program, they maybe have gone to this camp 1 or 2 years prior, kind of know what's expected of someone that is meant to be competing at a provincial, national, international level. So at this camp, we're able to give them more mental training and intro to mental training, intro to the rules of golf a little bit heavier to hopefully benefit their game, and so on. And then selection and onboarding. So again, we're hoping that we select the proper athletes that we can help develop to reach those next steps and make Ontario more predominant both in the national and international scene. But of course, being in Ontario, we know that not everyone is going to accept, and it might not be okay for everyone. So we're hoping for an 85% acceptance rate for our team. An example of when it might not make sense is an athlete who has a second home in Florida and is able to train in Florida all winter. The 3 camps that we're able to provide them for green grass training are just not the same as the amount of opportunity they're going to get to train and compete in Florida all winter. So in a situation like that, it would make more sense to continue to do what they're doing than taking them out of an environment where they can train 365 days a year. The onboarding, one of the things that we really like to reiterate is the expectations of the program, the expectations of being an Ontario athlete competing at the provincial and national stage, what the goals are, and then setting those goals appropriately based on the expectations we have as an athlete. Okay, so just a little bit more on Super Camp. So again, we're going through the full national testing protocols. We're getting an introduction to the rules of golf, introduction to mental skills, intro to the physical side of the game. This is the area that we see most lacking on golfers that are coming into our program, is their physical fitness. the biggest area to make an improvement. And we've seen, and that has been the biggest area of improvement. We're seeing our girls getting bigger, faster, stronger. Same with our boys. The boys in the NCAA actually on average have higher swing speeds and hit the ball farther than those in the PGA Tour. And again, the NCAA is the route, so they need to be able to compete in the NCAA if they want to compete on the tour later. And then again, course planning independence. One of the things we really try to do at this camp is get athletes making their own decisions. Again, one of those steps of moving from kind of that lower level into that train to compete to win stage is being able to make these decisions yourself. As a junior golfer and a college golfer, you don't have a caddy. You don't have, you may not always have a coach there when you're on an NCAA team of 5 players and 1 coach. So the ability to make these decisions on their own, understanding why they're making those decisions and coming up with a plan. So we try to, at this camp, give the athletes all the information they would need and kind of as a test, see how they use that information. And if they're not using it properly, then that's a great opportunity to implement that in the off season of our program and really help them understand how to use pin sheets and little resources like that that are really, really valuable in making that jump. So following Super Camp in early October, we now have the fun job of selecting our team. So looking at all the results for the season, looking at these testing protocol results and selecting a team. So I'm going to show you an example of some of the selection data we look at. Please don't take any regard to the names. This data is from 2 years ago, just so that I'm able to then talk about where they've gone from here. So here, of course, we look at stroke average as kind of the starting point. The other starting point is the rankings, national, provincial, national, and in some cases, the world rankings. That would be more at the national team level. Most players on our provincial team may not have a world amateur ranking at this point, and if they do, they're probably more on the national track. So from here, the 3 things we're going to look at mostly is their stroke average, their differential, that's how close they are to par, and their win losses against other people in the selection. So as you can see, these 2 are pretty standard, pretty close together. And where it gets really interesting is those head-to-head results. How are they competing against other players in Ontario? So just for some reference, this year, this player made the national team, as they should have, #1 player in the province based on this data. This player also made the national team down here. Important to note why she wasn't leading in stroke average and differential. What she did lead in was her NTP result. Very strong technical player, tons of potential, and chosen based on that. Again, a lot of these players ended up being in the provincial program going forward, and a lot going on to play collegiate level golf. Quite a few, this player here made the national team this past season, so 1 year on the provincial team and then 1 year on the national team, so moved up quite well. So just kind of an example of how, again, we only have 7 to 10 on the team per year, but kind of helps to show our progress, again, when we're tracking more athletes with the Super Camp process. I just wanted to include the head-to-head results, as this is, I always find it very interesting. You can look at the stroke averages, and of course, golf isn't, you're not able to compare one course to another. So this is always very interesting to compare athletes competing against each other. For example, this athlete down here, great stroke average, but when you actually look at it, she was beaten by almost every player when she competed against them. So while her stroke average was low, she wasn't actually performing and winning and doing well on the same courses that other players were doing well on. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. This is also very important when we do make our selection calls, and for the people that are kind of those bubble players to really be able to identify an order, which is of course needed for Quest for Gold and that kind of thing. Onboarding, the things that are really important with onboarding, relationship building, expectations. When I say expectations, I mean, a lot of the people, it's the goal to make Team Ontario, but the expectation is this is not the end. This is a step towards the national team or a step towards collegiate golf. We want to be very clear of where Ontario is in the amateur and amateur on Canadian and international scene. What are the post-secondary plans and an intro to goals? Saying you want to win a tournament is not a good goal in golf, but having process goals is. So really introducing measurable goals. And again, this may seem very kind of lower end athlete. But even though these athletes have competed at a provincial level, we find that these wider bred skills are not as well ingrained in them, and it becomes one of our priorities to ingrain them in those things. So one of the things I want to talk about is expectations. Of course, this is a very fine line and sometimes a difficult thing to talk about. But when we're looking at our Ontario athletes on the national and international scene, we need to know where we are in order to understand where we can go. So I'm just going to pull up kind of a very interesting chart. So this is the strokes gained of the top 10 players in the world. So basically what this is showing is the different parts of their game: strokes gained off the tee, tee to green, approach to green, around the green, and putting. So what we can see is the strongest part of these players' games is in that middle range of their game. Tee to green, approach to green, that kind of thing. Putting, not so much. Driving, obviously very good. But where we're seeing the biggest difference is that tee to green area. And then I've just pulled out Nelly Korda, who was the #1 player in the world when I pulled this data. And here we have one of the athletes who was on the team and then went on to make the national team. And this is not the same program because we don't have access to this program at the moment, but it shows the same results, but it's inversely related. So again, very strong driving, just as they are on tour. Pretty good putting, just as they are on tour. Sand, same thing. But where we're seeing the biggest gap is not a very good approach game. So when we see this player is playing to a +2 handicap here, they're playing to an 8 when it comes to the approach shot. Or when we look at these players, they're gaining almost 2 to 3 shots. So it shows us that there's a huge gap, that we are way behind in this area. So it allows us to make our goals for the future. Okay, sorry. So what you're looking at here is the overall testing data. Like I said, we have this data for all of Canada, which is wonderful. This is an example of an athlete from Ontario, a girl who went on to make the national team, and a boy who went on to make the national team. So again, you can see that this athlete way behind when it comes to wedges, approaches onto the green. Same with this athlete here. When you look at their wedge score 51 versus the national team 88. 58 versus 72. Pretty good when it comes to the long game, off the tee, etc. Same over here. A little weaker, but pretty similar. So again, we're seeing the gap that we have in Ontario, both within Canada, both within making the national team, and again with the top players in the world. So we'll use this data to really set the expectations so that those athletes can make their goals. Again, the ball speed is another big one. Again, 158 versus 172, 133 versus 141. So that really helps with the individual physical training plans of each of these athletes, which is one of the biggest areas that we're able to provide for them in growing as an athlete. So we've now set the expectations of the team. We have laid the groundwork for where we are as athletes. Now we get to plan and train each athlete. So from a technical and physical plan standpoint, we really want to, again, make those physical plans with each athlete very different. Each athlete's different. Mobility is different. What they need to work on in their golf swing is different. We are very fortunate to have a strength and conditioning coach who was a past competitive and Division I golfer who understands the golf swing very well and is able to work very well with both personal coaches and our coaching team on the provincial team. And again, those technical goals and understanding why. When the athlete gets to the next stage, they don't have access to a coach all the time. A lot of golf is independent training. So we really want to reiterate those skills to be able to work on their own, to be able to fix problems on their own. Why are you working on this technical? Why are you working on your elbow angle? Why are you working on more speed? And understanding that will make them better players in the long run. And again, I think it's kind of a theme here that one of the main themes of the program is education and setting them up for the next level. We're really kind of that transition program from being an athlete on their own who did well to setting them up for success at a high level. And again, that schedule and education. So what is the reality of the landscape? What is the reality of where you fit in the landscape? And how can we go on from there? Scheduling, really important for those athletes when they're figuring out their schedule to pick their majors. And again, with a program with as wide as ours, where we have some athletes going on to school the next year, some competing at a provincial championship, those majors are going to be different. For one athlete, that might be the Ontario Amateur, where they get to compete against other Ontario athletes at Division I colleges. And for another, it might be a Canadian Junior Championship, where they're competing against the top juniors in the country. So really understanding where your goals, where you are in their junior career, and whether or not they're going to college the next year. And then again, one of the big things is what the program is the ability to get on grass, the ability to get on grass, COVID aside, 3 to 4 times during the off season. The ideal world would be early December, and hopefully they can do an individual tournament on their own in December, early January, mid-February, and then in March. In March, the provincial team gets to go to a great event called the Can-Am Matches, which are the top athletes in Ontario versus the top athletes in South Carolina. It's a great experience. South Carolina, more often than not, is better. They have more access to training, and it's a great opportunity for our athletes to see just how good others are and where they want to be. Another thing is, again, combination of coach-led and individual training. So really allowing athletes to figure out how to make their own daily, weekly training plan, how to make their practice replicate a competition, block practice versus randomized practice. How are they practicing? Why are they practicing? We have a unique culture in Canada in that we're so used to practicing in the winter in hitting balls that we forget how to physically play. We're very good technically, but the ability to score is something that we lack. So how can we get that done? So doing on-course competitions and that kind of thing. And again, that well-rounded training, implementing nutrition. This is often the first time that our athletes are away from home and have the ability to make the decisions of what they're eating, and giving them the education of when we go to the grocery store to pick up snacks for the course or for breakfast, understanding how to make those decisions and making the right ones for them and therefore their game. And then time management, again, being away from home for the first time. You might be 15 or 16 years old, really stressed about school, and have to figure all that out on your own. This is just an example of a short game ladder. So again, building competition into practice, which again is something that we aren't able to do all the time in Ontario because we aren't able to play. So this is just an example of kind of our leaders. So you play someone that's one above you, you get to pass them and so on. And you want to be the top of the ladder. Spring, so again, the Can-Am matches are kind of the kickoff of the season. We're able to play against South Carolina, which is one of the best states for junior golf in America. This was the winning team in 2019. One of the best moments of my coaching career. Hadn't won since 2010, so 9 years later, Ontario was able to win. Interestingly enough, 2 people on the girls' side just won the individual championships of their conference last week. So again, really the ones that are succeeding here are being set up for success later. Canceled in 2020 and 2021, and then unfortunately did not defend the title this past year in 2022. And then we get kicked off for our Ontario season, starting with the Spring Classic, Golf Canada Next Gen, which means junior events. Some players will be playing USGA qualifying, depending again on the schedule and those goals. And then again, the personal coach, athlete team expectations. And these are things that really need to be set in stone now before the summer kicks off and people start going their separate ways, so we can really make sure we have kind of an eye on all of our athletes. Summer to May. So this is the busiest time. Our athletes are competing and we are tracking results for all Ontario athletes. So again, we are heavy competitions. Our seniors are getting ready for college, so they might have a little bit of a different schedule, and our results. So in the last year, we've created a better, more profound ranking system with the junior golf pathway to kind of, our rankings have been very flawed. They're not perfect now by any means, but they're getting better to really understand what our Ontario athletes are doing, both in the province and internationally, and being able to select those athletes for different opportunities as needed. This is an example of, whoops, WAGR, the World Amateur Golf Rankings for 19 and under in Canada, BC athlete, Ontario, Ontario, Ontario. So, but all three of these athletes are on the national team. So again, the World Amateur Rankings more of a national tool than a provincial tool, which is why we really needed to create our own. They've worked really well the last year and a half, and excited to see where they go this year with some more improvements. And of course, it's really important that our coaches are physically at tournaments to be able to see what talent's out there, see a swing that they love, see some speed, and really get out there. We would like to do some more regional camps and combines to, again, get more invested and be able to touch athletes a little bit younger, so they're not kind of breaking on their scene without us knowing about it. We're really seeing them develop, being able to help in that development, and again, just spread the reach of the program to get more athletes into the tunnel to be able to reach that national team or that NCAA level. And then after this, we started all over again. So again, kind of here's the summary. One thing I didn't get really into was the college recruitment piece that will be pretty heavy in the winter and in the spring, something we really like to help with. But again, that's part of kind of understanding where you are in the scene, looking at colleges, looking at golf stat, and understanding what school range you fit into. So that's kind of a cycle of the program. Again, I didn't go into detail of each individual athlete as it is so broad. When you have athletes from 15 to 18 years old on the girls and the boys side. But what we're really trying to do is kind of, again, one, get more athletes into the system to be able to help them, and two, make a more diversified program to help each athlete. I hope that was informative, and thank you for listening.